Opening section. The sun dipped low over the distant mountains, casting an amber glow across the sprawling training fields of the Dragonguard Academy. Among the shadows of towering stone walls and intricate battle formations, a single figure stood out against the dusk, a large, muscular human male with scarred hands and years etched into his lined face. His name was Kael, a grizzled veteran known for his ruthless efficiency and unflinching dedication to duty. Tonight, he was on patrol, moving quietly through the underbrush of the forest, his eyes ever vigilant. As Kael approached the edge of the academy grounds, his keen senses picked up an unusual sound, a soft, fluttering whisper barely audible over the rustling leaves. He froze, his instincts kicking into high gear. The noise seemed to be coming from a small, dark alcove beneath a thick grove of ancient trees. Stealthily, he drew closer, his weapon at the ready. "Show yourself," Kael commanded in a low growl, his voice carrying just enough authority to send a chill down any spine. But the only response was the soft hum of wind against leaves. He stepped into the alcove and found nothing but a small, trembling form huddled in the shadows. It was a dragonet, a young dragon no more than a year old, its wings still unfurled and awkward, scales a delicate shade of green tinged with silver. Kael hesitated, his initial combat stance shifting to a more cautious alertness. The dragonet looked up at him with wide, wary eyes, trembling slightly but not running. This was unlike any of the usual intruders he encountered: mercenaries, bandits, or rogue mages. This was something different. "Kael," a familiar voice broke through the tension. It was Ryker, his fellow garden friend, arriving with haste. "We've got reports of strange activity around these parts. Keep your eye out." Ryker's sudden appearance made Kael's instincts flare again. The dragonet, sensing another source of danger, let out a soft hiss and hunkered down protectively. "Got something here," Kael replied tersely, gesturing to the dragonet as he turned back to Ryker. "Not exactly the usual kind." Ryker stepped closer, eyes widening in surprise. "A dragonet? What's it doing this close to the grounds?" "I've got no clue," Kael admitted grimly. "But we need to move fast, figure out what's going on before something worse happens." He glanced around warily. "Stay alert." The dragonet watched them both with a mix of fear and curiosity, its small wings twitching nervously. Suddenly, an urgent beeping sound pierced the quiet night. The radio in Kael's ear flared to life. "Kael, Ryker, we've got reports of a strange energy signature near the eastern perimeter," came a worried voice over the channel. "It looks like it could be a breach." Ryker exchanged quick glances with Kael before replying, "Copy that. Heading your way." The dragonet gave another soft hiss, clearly distressed by the sudden escalation. Kael reached out cautiously, not sure if the creature would lash out or retreat in terror. To his surprise, it didn't fight him, instead pressing into his hand with a trusting warmth. "What do we do now?" Ryker asked, turning back to the dragonet. "Can't bring this thing with us." Kael's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "We need to find out who or what brought it here and why." His gaze flicked to the direction of the perimeter alert. "There's a breach to deal with first." Ryker nodded grimly, understanding the urgency. "Let's get this settled, and then we'll figure out what to do about the dragonet." As they moved swiftly towards the perimeter, Kael's grip tightened on the dragonet's fragile form. This was just the beginning. A mysterious child dragon and a potential enemy breach in one night. It wasn't often that Kael encountered situations this unpredictable, but tonight promised to be anything but routine. Meanwhile, deeper within the forest, hidden among the shadows, A figure watched them with keen eyes that gleamed with an ethereal silver light. She was tall and slender, her form graceful even as she remained motionless, cloaked in shadows. Her presence was as silent as the night itself, but Kael could feel her watching, an invisible observer who knew far more about what was happening than she let on. This figure was no ordinary witness, was the mother of the dragonet, the widow of a great dragon, mourning and seeking vengeance for her lost love. Her eyes never left the academy grounds as they prepared for the impending battle, her mind calculating every move, every potential weakness. Tonight, something significant was about to unfold, and she intended to be at the center of it. On of Section 1 strong hook into Section 2. The radio crackled again with alarming news, multiple breaches around the academy, and a mysterious energy source growing stronger by the minute. Kael and Ryker needed answers fast about both the dragonet's origins and the forces gathering to threaten their sanctuary. As they approached the eastern perimeter, the air shimmered ominously, suggesting more than just enemy troops were involved. What secrets would the night reveal about this small green dragonet and its connection to the growing chaos? The ground beneath their feet quaked ever so slightly as they ventured closer to the eastern boundary of the camp. The commander's expression was somber, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant murmur of whispered conversations among the soldiers stationed nearby. Just beyond the perimeter, the air grew strangely warm and dense, making it hard to breathe. It felt as though a thick curtain had been drawn between them and whatever lay beyond. This wasn't just a tactical dilemma, it was a supernatural occurrence that set everyone's nerves on edge. "Sir," one of the scouts whispered urgently, breaking the tense silence. "There are strange lights moving beyond the camp's edge. Not torches or fires from enemy line. Something else entirely." The commander signaled for his troops to stop and formed a small group with key officers. They huddled together, their movements cautious and deliberate as they debated the best course of action. The shimmering barrier seemed to expand slightly with each passing minute, drawing ever closer to the camp. "We need to know what's on the other side," the commander said firmly, his eyes narrowing. "But we can't risk a full-scale investigation without understanding the threat. Send in a small, stealthy squad with scouts who have experience dealing with the paranormal." The chosen team, a mix of seasoned veterans and specialists, moved swiftly into position. Their movements were silent, their equipment specially adapted to minimize detection. Each member carried additional gear, mystical relics, enchanted maps, and items rumored to be effective against unseen enemies. As they crossed the shimmering veil, the air thickened further, pulling at their clothes and hair with an unsettling force. The world around them seemed to warp, colors bleeding into one another like a feverish dream. Shadows twisted and danced, forming grotesque shapes that suggested more than just enemy soldiers were out there. The scouts returned quickly, their expressions grave. "Sir," one reported, his voice barely above a whisper, "the ground is crawling with unseen presences. Something ancient is awake, stirring from deep within the earth itself. We need a larger reconnaissance team to confirm this," the commander replied grimly, his mind racing. "But we also have to act now before whatever this thing is has a chance to fully manifest." He ordered several squads to gather, each equipped with not just military gear, but also the arcane tools needed to deal with the otherworldly threat. The air buzzed with a tangible sense of impending doom as the soldiers assembled, their training and instincts ready for combat against both physical and metaphysical threats. As they stepped through the shimmering barrier once more, the weight of the ancient forces pressing in on them grew heavier. Each step felt like an eternity, every breath echoing with an eerie resonance that seemed to whisper warnings from another dimension. The ground trembled violently, as if a massive creature were stirring beneath their feet, and suddenly a rift tore open in the earth. From within it emerged a towering form, wreathed in shadow and radiancy, a creature beyond comprehension, its presence warping reality itself. Commander and soldiers alike froze in shock, the enormity of what they faced sinking in. This was not a conventional battle. This was an assault on the very fabric of their world. The commander raised his voice over the sudden chaos, issuing commands with a steady hand, even as he felt the weight of the unknown pressing down upon him like a physical burden. "Deploy the enchantments," he shouted, pointing to various squads with specialized roles. "Protect the perimeter and keep the camp safe at all costs." While some soldiers worked frantically to reinforce the camp's defenses against the encroaching darkness, others focused on trying to understand and counteract the ancient force that had been awakened. The battlefield became a maelstrom of light and shadow, arcane magic clashing with conventional tactics in a desperate bid to hold back the tide of unnatural horror. The commander himself moved from group to group, his presence a beacon of calm amid the turmoil. Each decision he made was a calculated risk, each order a gamble with the fates. Yet there was no other choice. This was war on a scale beyond comprehension, fought not just with swords and guns, but with the very essence of belief and will. As the night wore on, the battle raged on, a struggle not just for control of territory or resources, but for the soul of the world itself. The commander's leadership was tested to its limits, pushed to the brink by the sheer magnitude of what stood between humanity and the abyss. In those moments, as reality stretched and snapped around them, he knew that this fight would define their future in ways unimaginable. Yet amidst the chaos and fear, there was also a profound sense of purpose, a determination to stand against the darkness no matter the cost. The air continued to shimmer ominously, the ground shuddering beneath the might of forces beyond understanding. But there, among the encampments, trembling soldiers, burned a light of defiance, the unwavering resolve of those who choose not just to survive, but to fight back against the most terrible and inexplicable threats imaginable. This was more than just another battle. This was the dawn of an era where the lines between reality and magic blurred, where heroes were forged in the crucible of the unknown, and where every soldier would have to face the unrelenting truth that some battles cannot be won with steel alone. Chapter 3: The Shifting Horizon. The sky turned an ominous shade of twilight as the sun began its descent behind the rolling hills of Arvania. The air was thick with anticipation, a tangible fog that draped over the earth like a cloak. Within the bustling encampment of Fort Valoria, preparations for the impending battle were in full swing. Soldiers moved with precision, setting up artillery and fortifying defenses, while scouts patrolled the perimeter, their eyes fixed on the horizon. In one corner of the fort, amidst the chaos, lay the makeshift infirmary. Here, amidst a flurry of medicinal herbs and bandaged soldiers, stood Alara, the young mage who had joined the ranks as an apprentice. Her blue eyes darted between the various injured fighters, her hands moving swiftly as she worked to mend their wounds with arcane spells. Despite her youth, she possessed an unwavering calm, a steady presence in the midst of chaos. Just then, the tent flap opened to admit Captain Linus Rain, a man known for his sharp mind and even sharper sword. His dark hair was matted with sweat, and his usually stern features were etched with concern. "Alara, we need your help," he said urgently, his voice devoid of its usual gruffness. Alara turned to face him, her gaze meeting his with a steady resolve. "What's happened?" she asked, not needing the answer in his eyes. Captain Rain motioned for her to follow, and together they walked towards the fort's central command post. Inside, the air was filled with the clatter of orders being shouted and maps being spread out on the tables. General Tiberius Valoria himself stood at the center, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the room. He was a seasoned warrior, known for his tactical brilliance, but even he seemed hesitant as he faced the impending battle. "Captain Rain," General Valoria acknowledged, turning to face them. "What is Alara's status?" "The girl has proven herself," Captain Rain replied, nodding towards Alara. "She's been working tirelessly in the infirmary. I think she should accompany us in the upcoming scouting mission." General Valoria's gaze shifted to Alara, his eyes narrowing as he appraised her. "A mage on a frontline mission? Are you sure?" "Her magic is vital," Captain Rain explained. "She can heal injuries and detect magical anomalies that others might miss. Plus, she has shown remarkable bravery in the face of danger." Valoria sighed, running his hand through his graying hair. "Very well, she will go as part of the scouting team, but you'll be responsible for her safety," he said, turning back to Captain Rain. Alara nodded, understanding the weight of the responsibility. "I'll do what needs to be done," she assured them. As they stepped out of the command post and back into the encampment, Alara felt a strange sense of unease settle in her stomach. She had known from the start that this was no ordinary mission, but now it felt as if the stakes had risen exponentially. The blurring line between reality and magic seemed to be pulling at her senses, almost as if the world itself were bending to the whims of unseen forces. Captain Rain led Alara to a small group of scouts gathered near the main gate. Among them was a tall figure with sharp features and flowing red hair, his eyes trained on Alara as she approached. "This is Colin," Captain Rain introduced her to the group. "He's a skilled scout who has been invaluable in our reconnaissance efforts." Colin's gaze flicked between Alara and Captain Rain before settling back on her. "Welcome, mage. I hope you are ready for what lies ahead," he said, his tone both respectful and cautious. Alara nodded, offering him a small, determined smile. "I am prepared," she replied. The group began to assemble their gear, packing supplies and checking weapons. As they gathered, Alara couldn't help but notice the tension in Colin's posture, his movements sharp and guarded. The moment before departure arrived swiftly, and the scout leader gave the final instructions. "We move out at dusk. Stick to the shadows and stay alert for any signs of hostiles or magical disturbances." With that, they began their journey, slipping through the darkened countryside with stealth and precision. Alara's magic tingled at her fingertips, a constant hum of readiness. As they moved deeper into the forest, the moonlight became their guide, casting eerie silhouettes against the trees. Their destination was an ancient, overgrown temple hidden deep within the woods. According to intel gathered by Colin, it was believed to contain a powerful artifact that could tip the scales in their favor. The temple itself was shrouded in mist and legend, its stone walls covered in strange, swirling runes that seemed to pulse with energy. As they approached the temple's entrance, Alara felt a sudden chill run down her spine. The air around her seemed to thicken, filled with a sense of foreboding that made her skin prickle. Colin, sensing her unease, slowed his pace and turned to her. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. Alara hesitated, then nodded towards the temple entrance. "There's something wrong here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I sense dark magic." Colin's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, there was a sudden rustling in the underbrush to their left. In the dim light, two shadowy figures emerged, their forms indistinct and menacing. Alara recognized them as Thulian scouts, a rival faction known for their ruthless tactics and magical prowess. Captain Rain drew his sword, his movements swift and precise. "Stay behind us, Alara," he ordered without breaking eye contact with the Thulians. "We'll handle this." Alara nodded, her hands glowing faintly as she prepared to defend herself. The two groups faced off in an uneasy standoff, their breath visible in the cold night air. Tension crackled between them, each side waiting for the other to make the first move. Suddenly, without warning, one of the Thulians lunged forward, his blade flashing in the moonlight. Captain Rain parried the strike with ease, but the skirmish escalated quickly, blades clashing and spells flying. Alara's mind raced as she cast protective spells around her, shielding herself from stray magic. As the battle raged on, Colin moved with incredible agility, his movements almost fluid in their precision. He dispatched one of the Thulian scouts with a swift, clean strike, but another had already slipped past their defenses and was moving towards Alara. She cast a berry, or spell, but it was only partially effective as the Thulian's blade grazed her arm, cutting through the fabric of her cloak. Captain Rain, noticing her injury, roared an order to Colin. "Guard her." Colin nodded, his eyes flashing with determination as he engaged the approaching scout. Alara gritted her teeth, focusing her magic on healing her wound while trying to maintain a defensive stance. The battle was fierce and chaotic, each moment bringing new challenges and threats. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the remaining Thulian scouts retreated, their injured comrades cradled in their arms. Captain Rain sheathed his sword, breathing heavily but clearly relieved that Alara had not been seriously harmed. "Are you all right?" he asked, moving to check her injury. "I'll survive," Alara replied, though her tone was strained. Sheathing her staff, she turned back towards the temple entrance, her expression resolute. "Let's go before they regroup." The group continued on towards the ancient temple, their movements more cautious now. As they approached the stone threshold, Alara felt a shiver run through her body, again, this time accompanied by a surge of magical energy. The temple was not merely an artifact repository, it was a living entity, its power stirring beneath the surface. Colin noticed her unease and laid a hand on her shoulder. "We're almost there," he said quietly. "Just stay alert." As they stepped inside the temple's dark interior, the walls seemed to close in around them, the air thickening with an oppressive weight. Strange symbols carved into the stones pulsed with an otherworldly glow, casting eerie shadows that danced across their faces. The group moved cautiously through the labyrinthine corridors, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Alara's magic remained on high alert, sensing the latent power within the temple. Suddenly, Colin's voice cut through the silence, his hand clenching around the hilt of his sword. "There," he whispered, pointing ahead. They rounded a corner to find themselves face to face with a massive stone pedestal in the center of a small chamber. Upon it lay an ancient artifact, a crystalline sphere pulsating with swirling lights and dark energies. Captain Rain's eyes widened as he recognized its significance. "This is the Lumen Crucible," he breathed. Illyra approached the pedestal, her hand reaching out tentatively to touch the sphere. The instant her fingers made contact, she felt an overwhelming rush of knowledge and power flood her senses. The artifact's magic was ancient and powerful, capable of reshaping reality itself. But with such power came immense danger, for it was not merely a tool, it was a gateway. Colin stepped forward, his expression grave. "We need to secure this and return to the fort immediately," he said, looking at Captain Rain. Captain Rain nodded, his decision clear. "Agreed," he said, drawing his sword and moving towards the artifact. He placed a protective rune around it before carefully lifting it from its pedestal. As soon as he did, the temple's oppressive atmosphere intensified, as if the very walls were protesting their removal of this ancient relic. With the Lumen Crucible safely in hand, they began to make their way back to the entrance, each step more cautious and fraught with tension. Illyra's magic buzzed around her, warning of unseen threats lurking in the darkness. Colin's presence beside her offered some comfort, his own aura of calm reassuring her that he was watching her back. As they neared the exit, Illyra felt an ominous chill settle over them once more. The temple's dark magic seemed to be awakening, sensing its loss and retaliating against their encroachment. Suddenly, the stones began to shift and rattle ominously, as if the very structure of the place was trying to close itself around them. Captain Rain's voice broke through the tension. "Hurry! We need to get out now." He hurried them towards the exit, but just as they reached it, the temple's oppressive energy seemed to coalesce into an invisible barrier, blocking their escape. Colin's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. "The temple is trying to trap us," he said, his voice tense. "We need a way around this." Illyra's hands glowed with a burst of light, and she focused her magic on dispelling the barrier. Her spell was weak against the temple's power, but it was enough to create a small opening. With renewed urgency, they scrambled through the narrow gap, Captain Rain leading the way. The exit burst into view as they emerged from the temple, the dark forest awaiting them outside. But their relief was short-lived as the entire structure shuddered behind them, the walls contracting inward as if trying to swallow everything inside. Captain Rain's eyes flashed with determination. "We need to move faster," he said, pushing them ahead. The group sprinted through the woods, the ground beneath their feet shaking violently. Illyra's magic was pushed to its limit, her exhaustion making every spell harder to cast. Colin was on alert, his senses sharp as he scanned the surroundings for any signs of further danger. As they emerged from the forest and onto a small clearing near the encampment, Captain Rain skidded to a halt, his eyes fixed on a sight that made their hearts sink. The once peaceful countryside lay in ruins, dark clouds rolling over the landscape, lightning flashing in jagged streaks. A massive creature, unlike anything Illyra had ever seen, towered before them. Its form was a grotesque amalgamation of stone and flesh, twisted limbs ending in sharp claws that scraped against the earth, sending up clouds of dust. The creature's eyes glowed with an eerie red light, and as it turned towards them, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble with its presence. Captain Rain unsheathed his sword, his face set in a grim determination. "This is no ordinary battle," he said, his voice steady despite the terror that gripped everyone else. "We face something beyond our understanding." Colin moved protectively beside Alara, his eyes never leaving the towering monster before them. The creature's growl rumbled through the air, the sound shaking the very roots of the forest around them. Alara's magic flared once more, her resolve hardening. "We must face this together," she said, her voice steady though her heart pounded in her chest. "Magic alone won not defeat it, but neither will brute force." Captain Rain nodded, his eyes flicking between Colin and Alara. "You're right," he said. "The Lumen Crucible may hold the key to defeating this thing. We need to get it back to the fort." With renewed determination, they turned back towards the encampment, their path now fraught with new dangers and challenges. The creature's shadow loomed over them, its presence a constant reminder of the peril that lay ahead. But as they moved forward, Alara couldn't help but notice the silent bond forming between her and Colin. His steadfast protection and unwavering determination spoke volumes in this moment of crisis. Despite their differences in background and training, they were united by a shared purpose that transcended even the shifting reality around them. Chapter 4 Shadows unveiled. The sun had long since set when Alara and her companions finally returned to Fort Valoria, each step heavy with the weight of the encounter they had just faced. The once tranquil surroundings now lay in shadowed ruins, dark clouds roiling overhead like a storm cloud unleashed on an unsuspecting world. As they approached the fort, Captain Rain's face was etched with grim determination. "Prep are for battle," he said, his voice cutting through the tension that hung thick in the air. "That thing outside the temple, it's not just another monster. There's something more at play here." Alara's mind raced as she tried to process what they had encountered. The Lumen Crucible pulsed with an almost painful resonance in her hands, its power raw and untamed. She could feel the temple's magic lingering, its influence spreading like a dark plague across the landscape. Inside the fort, the atmosphere was tense but organized. Soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, setting up defensive positions and reinforcing walls. Alara and her group were led to the central command post where General Valoria awaited them, his expression grave. "What news do you bring?" he demanded without preamble. Captain Rain stepped forward, his voice steady as he recounted their harrowing journey through the temple and the monstrous creature that now loomed outside the fort's walls. "We need your guidance," he concluded. "The Lumen Crucible is a key to understanding what we're up against." General Valoria's eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting between Alara and Colin. "You both witnessed something beyond our current understanding," he said, turning to the map laid out before him. He began pointing to various locations marked with dark symbols, indicating the spread of this new threat. "An ancient curse," he muttered, "awakened by the Lumen Crucible's removal. We need to study its effects and find a way to counter it." Alara's mind raced as she listened, her magic tingling in response to the growing darkness. Colin stood beside her, his expression contemplative but resolute. "We must gather more information," he said, his voice steady. "The scouts need to be sent out again, this time with a focus on understanding the true nature of this creature and its origins." General Valoria nodded, his gaze meeting Alara's once more. "Alara, I want you to assist in this reconnaissance. Your magical sense is invaluable." Alara hesitated, her fingers tightening around the Lumen Crucible. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, but also a strange thrill of purpose. "I will do my best," she replied, offering a small nod. As they stepped out of the command post, Alara and Colin fell into a silent walk, their eyes scanning the darkened surroundings for any signs of threat. The air was thick with anticipation, each shadow holding the potential for danger. But amidst the tension, something shifted between them, a sense of mutual understanding and trust that had been forged in the crucible of battle. They reached the main gate where a group of scouts were already assembling. Colin gave out orders sharply, his movements precise and efficient. "Alara will be joining us," he said to the group. "She'll help navigate any magical anomalies we might encounter." The scouts nodded respectfully, their eyes on Alara, with a mix of curiosity and respect. As they set out into the night, Alara felt her magic respond to the darkness, a strange sense of connection growing between her and the arcane energies that pulsed around them. Their journey led them deeper into the forest, the moonlight providing just enough illumination to see by. They moved with stealth and precision, each scout aware of the heightened danger lurking in the shadows. Alara's magic remained vigilant, casting subtle protective barriers and sensing any disturbances in the magical landscape. Suddenly, Colin's hand shot out, signaling them to halt. He gestured for them to spread out into a wider formation before continuing forward with cautious steps. His movements were almost fluid, his senses keenly attuned to every sound and movement around them. Alara's magic flared slightly as she approached the edge of the forest, her eyes narrowing as she sensed something amiss ahead. "Magic readings off the charts," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Colin's gaze locked onto hers, a silent question in his eyes. Alara nodded, confirming her assessment. "There's an anomaly," she said aloud, her voice steady despite the unease settling in her stomach. The group moved forward with increased caution, their senses heightened to the point of tension. As they neared a clearing, Alara felt her magic resonate even more strongly. The air was thick with dark energy, almost visible as a smoky haze that seemed to cling to their skin. She could feel a presence lurking just beyond her senses, something ancient and malevolent. Colin's hand tightened on his sword hilt as he sensed the same. "Prepare yourselves," he warned, his voice low but authoritative. "Whatever is ahead isn't natural." Suddenly, a shadowy figure darted from the underbrush, its form indistinct in the dim light. Before they could react, Alara's magic surged around her, forming a protective barrier as she cast a burst of light towards the approaching figure. The creature recoiled, revealing itself to be a twisted entity of flesh and stone, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly red. Captain Rain moved swiftly into action, his sword flashing as he engaged the creature. Alara joined him, her spells dancing around them like a shield. Colin dispatched another figure with precision, his movements fluid and deadly. The rest of the scouts engaged in a chaotic battle, each using their skills to fend off the unnatural attackers. The battle was fierce and relentless, each moment filled with danger and uncertainty. Alara's magic pushed her to her limits, her spells struggling to keep pace with the ever-evolving threats. She focused on healing her allies as much as she could while maintaining a protective shield around the group. As they fought through wave after wave of attackers, Colin's voice broke through the chaos. "There's more to these creatures than meets the eye," he said, his movements never slowing. "They are conduits for something darker." Captain Rain nodded grimly, his gaze shifting to Alara. "The Lumen Crucible isn't just an artifact, it's a key to this darkness," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to understand its power fully." Alara felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her as she cast a final burst of light towards a particularly aggressive figure. It recoiled, falling back into the shadows. The group pressed forward, their resolve hardening. Suddenly, Colin's hand signaled them to halt once more. He moved silently through the trees, his keen senses picking up something they had missed before. Elara felt her magic tingling again, sensing a deeper presence beyond the immediate danger. "Wait," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's another entity here." Colin nodded, his eyes narrowing as he sensed what she did. He moved forward, his movements almost cat-like as he slipped into the shadows. Elara followed closely behind, her senses on high alert. They approached a dense patch of undergrowth where Colin suddenly tensed. He gestured for them to hold position, his eyes fixed on something just beyond their sight. Elara's magic flared slightly, sensing an ancient and powerful presence. "Stay hidden," Colin whispered, his voice sharp and commanding. "Whatever this is, it's not something we should face directly." Elara nodded, her magic forming a barrier around them. The air seemed to thicken with the oppressive weight of the entity's power. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows taller than any human, its form shrouded in dark energy. It moved almost like a shadow itself, its steps silent and purposeful. "Back away," Colin hissed, his voice urgent. Elara didn't need to be told twice. She and Colin retreated silently, their movements fluid as they slipped back into the cover of trees. The figure seemed to sense their retreat, but made no move to follow, its presence lingering in the darkness like a haunting whisper. The figure remained motionless, cloaked in the shadows that seemed to deepen with each passing moment. Silence hung heavily between them, a thick curtain of anticipation and dread. As they turned to go, the air grew colder, not in temperature, but in a profound sense of loss and impending change. Her heart pounded in her chest, a wild drum roll against the edge of despair. She had hoped for answers, for understanding, instead finding only the cold, unyielding darkness that seemed to encapsulate the woman before them. Yet there was something more, an undercurrent of sorrow that she couldn't shake off. They moved quickly, their pace frantic yet controlled, the night air slicing through their clothes like knives. As they reached what they hoped was safety, the shadowed figure remained rooted where it was, a silent guardian watching over the remains of their fleeting hope and dreams. In the sanctuary of their hiding place, shadows condensed into the darkness of the room. She sat heavily on a discarded chair, clutching her chest as if to cage her racing heart. Her mind whirled with questions, each one biting deeper than the last, until she couldn't bear the weight any longer and let out a choked sob. His hand reached out, not in comfort, but in an unspoken acknowledgment of the shared pain they both carried. The sound of his breath echoed in the confined space, each exhale a testament to his struggle. In that moment, they were not adversaries, nor were they lovers. They were simply two beings lost in the same labyrinth of despair. The darkness outside seemed to press in further, the figure's presence looming larger than before, as if mocking their fragile hold on hope. Each heartbeat was a reminder of her own mortality, of the alien woman whose fate now entwined with theirs, a delicate thread that could unravel at any moment. She turned to him, eyes wide with unshed tears, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are we supposed to do?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. He didn't know either, but he had a sense, a gut feeling, that there was something more than just fleeing. There was a promise, a responsibility that they both shared, that figure represented. It wasn't clear yet, but it gnawed at them, demanding an answer. She stood suddenly, her eyes locking with his in a moment of clarity and mutual understanding. The darkness outside, oppressive and suffocating, became less important in the face of the connection that burned brightly between them. They were bound together by more than just circumstance or proximity. It was a deeper tie, forged in moments of shared fear and vulnerability. As she stepped towards him, her hand reached out as if to touch his face, but faltered just before making contact. The breath caught in her throat. The moment stretched into infinity. He mirrored her movements, reaching, but not quite touching. The air between them sparked with a strange energy, electric yet tender. "Promise me," she whispered, her voice quivering but resolute, "that we will never give up." The words were more than an affirmation. They were a declaration of willpower and unity in the face of overwhelming odds. His eyes flickered with a mixture of resolve and sadness, understanding exactly what she meant. She wasn't asking for him to save her or to promise something he couldn't deliver. Instead, it was an unspoken pact to face whatever came next together. "I promise," his voice broke slightly, yet resolute, "as long as you do." Their hands met in the middle, fingers intertwining in a silent vow of solidarity. The moment was filled with a profound sense of acceptance and determination. It wasn't the resolution they were looking for, nor the answers they needed. Instead, it was a beacon in the darkness, a light that burned fiercely but didn't require sight to see. In that instant, as the shadowy figure's presence outside faded into mere memory, the bond they forged became stronger, unbreakable yet fragile. It wasn't about love or destiny, but the promise of hope and perseverance. The darkness receded ever so slightly, replaced by a subtle shift in their perspective. They were not merely reacting to the world around them, they were shaping it. The figure's haunting presence lingered, but it no longer held the same paralyzing grip. She looked at him once more, her eyes reflecting the newfound clarity and determination. There was still so much unknown, but together they faced the uncertainty with a steadfast resolve. They stepped out into the night again, the figure's shadowy form now a distant silhouette against the horizon. But they walked forward, side by side, their promise of hope and resilience burning brightly in the face of everything that sought to extinguish it. In the quiet moments that followed, the air grew warmer, less oppressive. They moved towards an uncertain future, but one anchored by the promise they shared. And in that moment, the darkness faded to a mere whisper. Final line, promise kept. As he watched her climb into the boat, a sense of finality washed over him, leaving an ache in his chest that wouldn't subside. The last few days had been a blur of hasty goodbyes and unresolved questions, yet no matter how much he tried to linger on the edge of this moment, the inevitability of her departure was impossible to deny. The sky overhead was a deepening shade of purple, with streaks of orange bleeding into the horizon as the sun prepared to set. The air held a coolness that promised the coming of night, though for now it was still tempered by the lingering heat of the day. He stood there, rooted in place, until she turned around one last time and waved, her hand cupped like a small boat of its own, carrying with it the weight of words left unsaid. With each paddle stroke, she grew smaller against the expansive canvas of the sea, until she was just a tiny speck bobbing among the waves. It wasn't until the faint outline of her boat disappeared entirely into the distance that he turned and walked away from the cliff's edge, the cold biting at his skin as the first chill of evening settled in. Back at his hut, He found a piece of paper lying on the table. It was folded into a neat square, bearing only a single word scrawled across it: promise. A shiver ran through him, not from the cold, but from the sudden realization that he had failed to keep his promise, that he hadn't spoken the words he should have as she prepared to leave. Those words, if unspoken, felt like a heavy weight now pressing down on his chest. He thought of her strength, her unwavering belief in the future despite all the obstacles around them. Her faith in the world and its capacity for change had always been infectious, yet here he was, filled with nothing but uncertainty. The letter in his hands felt like a lifeline, a reminder not just of what they'd shared, but of what they might yet achieve if only they could bridge this gap between them. His fingers traced over the lines lightly, as though seeking to understand the depths behind those two simple letters: promise. He walked to the edge of his small garden, where she had often sat, lost in thought among the rows of vegetables and wildflowers. It was her favorite spot, where she would sometimes disappear for hours, leaving him to tend to everything on his own. Yet despite the solitude that sometimes seemed overwhelming, it was also here that he found solace, a quiet place for reflection. Plucking a sprig of mint from one of the bushes, he crushed it gently between his fingers and brought it up to his nose. The sharp scent acted like a catalyst for memorous times spent laughing together, days filled with shared stories and dreams of what they might build, if given enough time. Those images seemed to pulse warmly within him now, each one pulling him closer to the idea that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. Back inside, he pulled out an inkwell and pen from a drawer. With deliberate strokes, he began writing, pouring out his thoughts onto paper, hoping in some small way to bridge the distance between them. As the words flowed, they became less about regret and more about resiliency, about how the promise was not broken so much as it was waiting for the moment when both parties could hold up their end. The letter ended with a pledge to keep trying, to reach out again and again, until every last trace of doubt between them faded away. It was an act of faith, one that didn't guarantee resolution, but acknowledged the power in holding on to hope. Outside, the night had fully taken hold by the time he sealed the letter and set it aside. The stars above shone like tiny pinpricks of light against the dark expanse, each a testament to the infinite possibilities that lay beyond the reach of simple human understanding. As dawn broke over the horizon, he stepped out into the fresh morning air, feeling a renewed determination to find her again. It wouldn't be easy. There were miles between them now, vast expanses of water separating two hearts that yearned to reconnect. But with each new day came the opportunity for another step forward, another chance at bridging the gap. With this thought guiding him, he turned and walked towards the shore once more. The sea stretched out before him, expansive and powerful, yet it also held within its depths the possibility of connection, a thread that wove together past promises and future hopes. Each footstep took him closer to the spot where she had last set sail, reminding him of his commitment to honor the bond they shared, no matter what challenges lay ahead. And so, he walked along the water's edge, the first rays of sunlight glinting off the waves, casting a golden path before him. It was a journey not just across the miles, but through time and distance, toward a future where the promise of their shared past could find fulfillment once more.